The sun hung low over the rugged Montana landscape, casting long shadows across the winding dirt road that led to the old iron bridge spanning the raging Yellowstone River. It was late afternoon in the heart of summer, the kind of day where the air shimmered with heat and the river below roared like a living beast, its rapids churning white foam over jagged rocks that had claimed more than a few lives over the years. Emily Harper, a 28-year-old artist from the city, had come out here seeking solace. Her life in Chicago had crumbled, a painful divorce, a job lost to corporate cuts, and a sense of emptiness that no gallery opening or late-night paint session could fill. She'd driven west on a whim, ending up in this remote corner of Big Sky Country, renting a small cabin near Livingston. That day, she'd hiked along the riverbank, sketchbook in hand, trying to capture the wild beauty that seemed to mock her own fractured spirit. But as the hours passed, the weight of her despair grew heavier. Standing on the bridge, gazing down at the merciless waters 50 feet below, she felt an overwhelming pull. Tears streamed down her face as she climbed onto the railing, her hands trembling, her heart pounding. The wind whipped her long auburn hair, and for a moment, she hesitated, whispering a silent goodbye to the world that had let her down. Then, with a sob caught in her throat, she let go and fell. The plunge was instantaneous terror, the air rushing past her ears, the world spinning in a blur of blue sky and green trees. She hit the water feet first, the impact knocking the breath from her lungs like a sledgehammer. The river was ice cold from mountain snowmelt, shocking her system as it swallowed her whole. She surfaced gasping, but the current was relentless, dragging her downstream toward the rapids where the river narrowed and exploded into a frenzy of whitewater. Boulders loomed like teeth, waves crashed over her head, and she flailed desperately, her arms burning as she tried to swim against the impossible force. Panic set in fully now. She screamed for help, but the roar of the rapids drowned her voice. Debris, branches, logs, battered her as she was tossed like a rag doll. Her mind raced with regrets, the unsent letters to her sister, the dreams she'd abandoned, the life she wasn't ready to end after all. But the river didn't care. It pulled her deeper into the chaos, her strength fading with every futile kick. A mile upstream, on the opposite bank, Jake Harlan was riding his horse along the trail that paralleled the river. Jake was a true cowboy, born and raised on a sprawling ranch outside Bozeman. At 32, he had the weathered look of a man who'd spent his life under the open sky, broad shoulders from years of roping cattle, sun-tanned skin etched with faint lines around his steel-blue eyes, and a worn Stetson hat that shaded his strong jaw. He'd lost his parents young in a trucking accident and had poured everything into the land, the animals, and a quiet existence that kept the loneliness at bay. That day, he'd been checking fence lines on his faithful quarter horse, Thunder, when he heard a distant splash and a faint cry carried on the wind. At first, he thought it was an animal, maybe a deer caught in the current, but as he urged Thunder closer to the bridge, he saw her, a figure plummeting from the railing. His heart seized. No, he muttered, kicking Thunder into a gallop along the bank. He watched helplessly as she hit the water and was swept away. Without a second thought, he scanned the river ahead. The rapids were coming fast, deadly drops and hydraulic holes that could trap even the strongest swimmer. There was no time to call for help, cell service was spotty out here, and by the time rescuers arrived, she'd be gone. Jake's mind flashed to his own dark days after losing his folks, how the river had been his escape, fishing or just sitting on the banks until the pain dulled. He knew these waters intimately, where the currents pulled strongest, where rocks hid beneath the foam. He spotted her now, a tiny figure bobbing in the torrent, arms thrashing as the first big rapid loomed. She was heading straight for a notorious stretch called Devil's Churn, a series of standing waves and holes that had drowned rafters before. Jake didn't hesitate. He reined Thunder to a stop near a bend where the bank jutted out closer to the main channel. Tying his lasso to a sturdy tree just in case, he stripped off his heavy boots and belt, keeping only his jeans and shirt. The woman was approaching fast, her cries now audible over the roar. She locked eyes with him for a split second as the current carried her past, wide, terrified eyes pleading for salvation. Jake's voice boomed across the water, deep and commanding, cutting through the chaos, "Hold on." Then, without another word, he leapt from the bank, diving into the frigid river after her. The shock of the cold hit Jake like a wall, but he'd swum these waters before, in calmer times, sure, but his body remembered. He surfaced strong, stroking powerfully toward her position. The current aided him now, pulling him downstream at breakneck speed. Emily, exhausted and half-drowned, caught sight of him, this stranger in a cowboy hat, somehow in the water with her, closing the gap. Hope flickered in her chest for the first time since the fall. "Help," She gasped as a wave submerged her. Jake powered through, his muscles screaming from the effort. He reached her just as they entered the rapids proper. A massive wave crashed over them, spinning them both. Underwater, everything was darkness and pressure, but Jake's hand found her arm in the turmoil. He pulled her close, wrapping one arm around her waist as they broke the surface. "I've got you," he yelled, his voice steady despite the danger. "Hold on to me." They plunged into the heart of the rapids together. The river tossed them mercilessly, over drops that felt like free falls, into holes that sucked them under, against rocks that bruised and scraped. Jake used his body to shield her where he could, taking the brunt of impacts. His legs kicked furiously to keep them oriented downstream, feet first, the safest way to navigate whitewater. Emily clung to him desperately, her fingers digging into his shirt, coughing up water but alive because of his grip. Flashes of their lives intertwined in those terrifying moments. Jake thinking of the ranch waiting empty, wondering if this was how he'd go out. Emily realizing this cowboy had risked everything for a stranger, igniting a spark of will to survive. They bounced off a submerged boulder, pain shooting through